Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blitz Sports Media. My name is Ryan Lincoln. I'm back with my co-host Brady Penn. We are on the Blitz angle, and we are talking about the biggest combine followers, our five biggest losers from the NFL Combine, whose draft stock is going to be taking a hit from their performances at the Combine. I was there. Was definitely an interesting sight. We noticed some players that obviously showed out in terms of athletic ability and on the field itself. Some players sat out. We saw a lot of Shadur Sanders sitting on the sidelines, Travis Hunter videos on the sidelines. All in all, though, great experience for us here at Blitz and providing you guys that great information. So, Brady, let's get right into our five biggest followers from the NFL Combine. Who's number one?
Yeah, so the first guy for me is a guy that we actually talked about being a potential riser in our video earlier this week, and that is Kaleb Johnson from Iowa. I said that if he had a really good day of testing, he could move his way maybe even into the late first, early second type of range, and he's still graded out elite in terms of the size department. He's a 6', 224, kind of mix of power and speed. The speed wasn't there in Indy this weekend the way that a lot of people expected, though. A 4.58 40. He just got an okay composite speed grade. He didn't do the agility testing. He didn't do the explosiveness testing. Only had a 1.6 10-yard split. And that's just not going to cut it for a guy with his play style that does have elements of explosiveness. I still think that Kaleb Johnson is a good running back prospect, at the very least a fine running back prospect, but he had a chance to really up himself in the draft rankings, and he didn't capitalize with his 40-yard dash performance. And that's the danger, I think, with these guys that I talked about in our last video that are kind of skipping out on these other drills, like the three-cone drill, the shuttle, the broad jump, the vertical jump. The guys that are skipping out on that, they're banking it all on the 40-yard dash. It's all or nothing. And if you have a performance like Kaleb Johnson in the 40, it could really tank your stock, and you don't really show any kind of versatility in your athletic ability by skipping out on the other events.
Yeah, Kaleb Johnson was one of the top three running backs in a lot of people's draft boards heading into the NFL Combine. And I don't think a lot of people understood what Kaleb Johnson was good at Iowa. He was more of a power running back, wasn't necessarily a receiving back. And to be honest, I think a lot of people were expecting him to just run a better time. I was expecting, maybe under a 4.5. I wasn't expecting a 4.58. If he would have ran under a 4.5, he'd be similar to Amarian Hampton, to where no one would have any concerns about him and it would be okay. But here we are. He's a bigger running back who doesn't necessarily have the receiving skills that some of these other backs have. You're on a 4.58, it doesn't look great, right? You're going to have to be a top end talent in terms of a runner, and I'm not necessarily sure he's that guy. He's a good running back. I'm not sure if he's that guy. And I think, to be honest, he's going to slip to the third round now at this point, due to kind of how he performed in the Combine. And you're right, he risked a lot not performing in any of the other drills. I think he could have had a lot to kind of show in the receiving game. He has a lot to prove in that aspect, that he wasn't necessarily a receiver out of the backfield in Iowa. And I think him doing more of those drills as a receiver would have helped his stock. Didn't participate in those, just did the 40, had a rough showing, and now here we are. He's falling down draft boards. I have him as my RB6 now, heading into post-combine life here. Let's get into my
all this tells me, though, with the 4.51 or what was it, 4.58 40, whatever it was. He's a chief. This is the type of guy. This is the type of guy that they would draft. I actually had mentioned him before, but that would be the most Chiefs thing ever. Like, if it'd be like Judkins is on the board and they go with Kaleb Johnson instead. Like,
I would be so upset with that. Judkins would be so nice in Casey.
But you can't tell me that's not something they do, though.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do it, Brett Veach. All right, getting into my first guy, Tre Harris from Ole Miss. Now, Tre Harris, honestly, didn't really perform that bad, to be honest. I think Tre Harris, we're going to take a look at some of his RAS stuff. He graded out as a 9. Ultimately, didn't have a bad day, but it was a 40 that was concerning for me. 4.5 plus for Tre Harris. He always, wasn't the most athletic guy at Ole Miss. Didn't necessarily prove to me that he was going to be anything different from, any of the other receivers in the class. And I thought Tre Harris had a chance of separating himself, jumping up, maybe, passing Emeka Ibuka, Matthew Golden, passing those guys with his combine performance. He didn't necessarily do that for me in the combine, and, he's falling down draft boards. I think he's potentially a late second round pick at this point where, he could have slipped maybe at the early second round. I think he's just not one of those guys. I don't think he's going to be a great NFL player. And I think, honestly, playing with a good quarterback throughout a majority of his college career helped his production. I'm not necessarily super high on Tre Harris right now.
I'm the complete opposite of you
Oh,
on this one. I actually really like Tre Harris. I don't think I was like blown away by his combine performance or anything, but just watching him, I watched a lot of Ole Miss tape last week as I was trying to get into Jackson Dart a little bit, trying to get myself to buy into Jackson Dart, which spoiler alert, I didn't. I don't like Jackson Dart, and I actually think it was the opposite. I think Tre Harris and the rest of the offense in Oxford made Jackson Dart look a little bit better than he was. And I think that they are explosive wide receivers. I think Tre Harris, not the fastest guy. He's not like a straight burner, but he's a taller wide receiver that I think plays with really long strides and has a good understanding of space. We'll see. I definitely, as a Patriots fan, if we don't go wide receiver in the first round, I would not be upset if that's who they ended up going with in the second. I do think that he will be kind of maybe the 10th pick in the second round type of range. I don't think he's going right at the start of the second round, but I don't know if he drops all the way to the end of it. So that's the first one I think we've had differing opinions on.
all right. Who is your next guy on this list?
It's another wide receiver, but it is Tez Johnson. It was a disaster for him in Indianapolis, and it actually started out good. I mean, the explosiveness grade, he had a pretty good vertical, especially for only being 5'9", just under 5'10". He had a 37-inch vertical. 10-foot, 11-inch broad jump was really good. And then even on the shuttle and the three cone, he killed it at the three cone. But it was the weight and the 40-yard dash. And maybe we don't need to get caught up on the 40 with some of these guys. I have always kind of subscribed to the belief of it really doesn't. A 40 doesn't matter as much as game tape. A 40 doesn't matter as much as your game speed, but it does matter a little bit. And the concern for me is that he weighed in at 154, which is tiny. And
I actually showed a graphic at the combine that he was one of the 5 skinniest players, to perform at the combine. And I was right next to Commanders and Seahawks scouts who were kind of laughing at the graphic.
Yeah, I mean, just for a scale reference, I'm not a big dude at all. I'm 178 pounds. Like the fact that he's 154 pounds is pretty alarming to me. And then when you're 154, if you dropped weight even to become 154 and run your 40, you better be flying. And he wasn't. He didn't run a bad time. 4.51 is not a bad time, but 4.51 at 154 as a wide receiver is pretty terrible. And I think that legit, that's those two numbers in and of themselves, if you don't throw in the rest of the testing, are like UDFA type of grades at the combine. He'll be a 5th, 6th rounder maybe, but he's not going anywhere near the first 3 rounds after this. I really don't think at all.
Yeah, Tez Johnson has to be a perfect route runner throughout his career, and he has to gain weight if he wants to have any sort of traction in the NFL. If not, he's going to be a practice squad guy throughout his career. He's not fast enough. He doesn't have an elite speed. Part of the thing with those smaller guys is that they run faster, right? He just doesn't run very fast at all. He's not an elite playmaker, but he can move side to side really well. And that's why I think that his only traction in the league could be as an elite route runner, but he'd have to gain weight too. There's so many ifs with Tez Johnson as a player. Now, he was very productive in college, but ultimately the NFL is a different animal. There's a lot better athletes. There's a lot better cover corners in the NFL going up against Tez Johnson. If he is not separating, which he's probably going to have a hard time with, and his route running is not very elite, he's not going to be able to stay on an NFL roster. He's going to be a practice squad guy. And I think your projection of 5 might be even a little high for Tez Johnson. I'm thinking 6, 7 right now with him.
Yeah, he's probably just going to go to the Broncos. If you know anything about his relationship with Bo Nix, they'd probably go pick him up and see what they can do. Obviously, you've got the relationship there with Nix. For those of you that don't know, pretty much when he was 15, Tez Johnson got adopted by Bo Nix's family. They ended up playing together in college as well, and they're basically brothers. So that's the story there. But we'll see with Tez Johnson, but not encouraging testing-wise.
Yep, and the next guy that I want to mention here, we have Isaiah Bond, the man himself who said he was going to break the record. Listen, Isaiah Bond, you can't say you're going to break the record and run over a 4.35. That is just bad looks, my guy.
Which is still a good time, but you can't, like you said, you can't be talking like that.
You can't be saying that. To be honest, look at the composite score, 4.41 on here, 9.3, still really good percentile for him. But the height and weight aren't necessarily there for Isaiah Bond. And to be honest, he makes this list just for basically saying he's going to break the combine record, and he just doesn't run under 4.35. But to be honest, him as a prospect, Brady, if he's not running like a 4.3, I mean, it's concerning. He doesn't have the height. He doesn't have the weight. He is a deep threat. He's like a Marquise Goodwin, basically, is what his ceiling might
And
be.
his production got worse after heading to Texas from Alabama as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. What is your outlook on Isaiah Bond?
I'm just not super. I mean, he's a Georgia guy, he's a Gwinnett County guy, and if you always ask me if Gwinnett County guy is going to end up being good, the odds are usually yes. But like you said, the height, the weight, they're not really there. He didn't have a ton of production. He got outshined by Matthew Golden down the stretch, the transfer who had to learn this offense just like Bond and did way better. He was better at Alabama, and it's just the last year or so. This is a guy that was getting mocked as a first rounder even mid-season this year, and it's kind of fallen off for him. I think he could even be like a third round type of receiver this season.
Yeah, I just don't think like the skill set's not there for a first 2-round type of a player. I think if you take him at that point, considering the fact where he was speed-wise, like I don't think it's worth the investment. I think he's a 3rd-round guy, and I think a team that reaches on him in the first 2 rounds is making a mistake based on kind of where his outlook is as a current player. All right, Brady, who is the last player that lost a ton of value here at the NFL Combine?
It's not due to his testing. He actually did fairly well in those regards, but it's Will Howard. Will Howard, I honestly feel bad for him because he got literally booed during his throwing session in Indy because he just kept missing receivers. You're throwing on air, and I'm sure nerves is 100% a factor there. And I'll give him some benefit of the doubt of being a national champion quarterback, being an older guy coming into this draft. Still think he could go late second, early third in a not deep quarterback class, but the showing with him throwing the ball to the wide receivers yesterday just was not good. And honestly, I feel bad for him. And by the way, shout out to Shedeur Sanders for coming out in his defense. I don't know if you saw that, but Shedor's actually made a tweet talking about like, stop coming at Will Howard. He's a great quarterback. He won a national championship. Like one day of bad throwing on drills doesn't mean anything. And I actually do take a little bit from that. I think that Will Howard is still going to be fine. I don't think that was who he is, but definitely not the time that you want to have those yips on that kind of stage.
Yeah, the yips for sure definitely got to Will Howard, and speaks a lot of volume for Shedeur, who a lot of people just seem to constantly jump on and try to find a way to put him down. One of the things that I noticed when Shedeur was there and we had a chance to interview him is that he actually stayed after his scheduled time to answer more questions. If people stopped him, Shedeur stopped, answered their questions. I was very impressed with how mature Shedeur was in person. And, some people just kind of got to back off a little bit. I know Shedeur has some concerns on the field, and his dad is very outspoken about his son, but Shedeur seems like a good kid. He seems like, he has the right mindset going forward. And I'll say that. And then with Will Howard, I mean, this guy is just not going to be much in the NFL, Brady. I mean, there's a reason why Will Howard is a middle-round quarterback despite being a national champion. He's just not really a special talent, and unfortunately for Will Howard, right, he could have proven a lot at the Combine. He could have shown athletically he's there with some of the top quarterbacks like Brady Cook showed. Brady Cook went and showed out as a really athletic quarterback.
Hey, Brady Cook's getting moved to wide receiver.
Dude, he showed out, though. He showed out. I'll say that. He showed out.
I'm already seeing people saying if you move him to a Y role in the NFL, he might could do something with that speed. But no, like you're saying, I mean, with Will Howard, we'll see. But after the national championship, he had a lot of momentum that he could have capitalized on. There were people that were like, oh, teams think that he could sneak into the first round. I think that's absolutely dead. But we'll see for Will Howard. Don't know about the talent. Does seem like a good guy. And like you said, Shedeur does as well for that. And just to piggyback off that real quick, I've never really been with the Colorado hate. Deion, all-time legend. For all we know, all he's done is help young men develop and help young men become real men. And he's pretty much led Travis Hunter through his entire college journey. He's pretty much Travis Hunter's father figure at this point. And Shedeur, like, I think people just don't like him because he's Deion's son and because he's confident. Like, he's not overly cocky. He works hard. He seems like a good person, so I don't really get that. I'm not sure he's going to be the greatest NFL quarterback, but that doesn't mean that I think we need to kick this guy all the time like some people love to do. So,
all right. Well, yeah, that is our biggest fallers from the NFL Combine. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the 8 biggest risers from the NFL Combine. That video also dropped today. If you guys are interested in more Blitz Sports Media content, hit that subscribe button, and me and Brady will catch you guys next time.